Your soulmate was caught crying about your age last night, they told their friend. My beloved child, before another thought enters your mind, stay exactly where you are, because what unfolded last night was never meant to become ordinary conversation. It began with silence. Then a single sentence changed everything. Someone noticed tears that were never supposed to be seen. Someone heard words that were never supposed to leave the heart. And strangely enough, every one of those words pointed toward you. No, this is not a story about coincidence. It is about the invisible weight people carry when their hearts discover something they cannot explain with logic. Last night, while the world was distracted by noise, one soul found itself unable to hide the truth any longer. Your soulmate sat quietly, staring into the distance, and when a close friend asked a simple question, the answer did not come immediately. Instead, tears arrived first. Stay with this moment. Sometimes emotions reveal more than conversations ever can. The friend leaned closer, expecting an ordinary explanation. But what they heard was something completely different. It was not regret. It was not disappointment. It was something much deeper, a feeling that had been growing silently for longer than anyone realized. They whispered, I keep thinking about their age, and I don't know why it affects me this much. The room became still. Not because of the words themselves, but because everyone could hear the emotion hidden behind them. What if age was never the real subject? What if it was only the surface of a much bigger realization? Think about that for a second. People often believe numbers define timing. They believe life follows perfect schedules. Yet the heart has never obeyed calendars. It recognizes sincerity before certainty. It notices character before appearance. It remembers peace before perfection. That is why this moment matters. Because the tears were never about counting years. They were about wondering whether two paths, separated by different seasons of life, could somehow still arrive at the same destination. You may not understand why you're hearing this today. But perhaps today is exactly when this message was meant to find you. Pause. Have you ever noticed how certain questions keep returning no matter how many times you ignore them? Some questions refuse to disappear because they are preparing you for answers you haven't reached yet. Last night, your soulmate's friend remained silent for several moments before finally speaking. Why does this bother you so much? Another long pause followed. Then came words that surprised everyone nearby. It isn't their age I'm thinking about. It's the fear that life might convince them they aren't enough before I ever get the chance to tell them what I truly see. Those words changed the atmosphere instantly. Because suddenly, this wasn't about numbers. It became about value. About timing. About missed opportunities. About everything people leave unsaid until emotions become too heavy to carry alone. Stay a little longer. This isn't where the story turns. It's where it begins. The friend looked carefully and said something almost unexpected. If someone makes your heart this certain, maybe the obstacle isn't outside you. Maybe it's only the story you've been repeating inside your own mind. Those words lingered. Not for seconds. For hours. Imagine hearing a sentence that quietly rearranges the way you see your future. Imagine realizing that the walls you feared were never built by destiny, only by doubt. Could one conversation really create that kind of shift? Perhaps. Because sometimes the smallest conversations open the biggest doors. And here's something even more remarkable. While everyone else believed the night had already reached its emotional peak, another realization was beginning to form, one that nobody in that room expected. It wasn't spoken immediately. It waited patiently, almost as if the perfect moment had not yet arrived. Before you move on, remember this one thought. The most powerful truths rarely arrive through loud announcements. They arrive through quiet moments that change the direction of a heart forever. And what your soulmate chose to reveal next would leave even their closest friend completely speechless. Wait, don't rush past this next moment, because the conversation did not end when the tears stopped. In many ways, that was only the beginning. As the silence settled over the room, your soulmate's friend realized there was still something being held back. You know those moments when someone wants to speak, yet their heart is searching for the right words? This was one of those moments. The friend leaned forward and quietly asked, "If this is truly how you feel, then why haven't you told them?" Your soulmate lowered their eyes for a few seconds. It wasn't hesitation born from uncertainty, it was the weight of caring too deeply. Finally, they answered in a voice so calm that it almost sounded like a whisper. "Because I don't want them to believe they have to change anything to be worthy." Those words lingered in the air. Not one person interrupted. Not one person laughed. Instead, everyone began seeing the situation differently. The conversation was no longer about age. It was about acceptance. It was about recognizing someone for the person they already are, rather than who the world expects them to become. Think about that. How often do people spend years trying to fit into someone else's expectations, never realizing the right connection values authenticity far more than perfection? Your soulmate's friend smiled gently and replied, "Then perhaps you're waiting for a problem that doesn't even exist." Those simple words sparked something unexpected. For the first time that night, hope quietly replaced uncertainty. Stay with this story, because every sentence is leading somewhere meaningful. Your soulmate looked toward the window, watching the first hint of dawn begin to brighten the horizon. Almost as if speaking to themselves, they said, "Maybe destiny doesn't ask whether two people are the same age. Maybe it asks whether two hearts are ready to grow in the same direction." No one answered immediately. Some thoughts don't require a response. They simply settle into the heart. If you've reached this point in the story, I'd love to know what you think. Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes another perspective helps someone else see hope where they couldn't before. And if these stories bring you encouragement, subscribing simply means we'll continue this journey together. Just then, the friend asked one final question. If you had one chance to tell them something today, without fear, what would you say? This time there was no long pause. No uncertainty. No hesitation. Your soulmate took a deep breath and answered with quiet confidence. "I would tell them that every quality the world keeps measuring is the very thing I stopped measuring the moment I saw their heart. I would tell them that time doesn't decide who deserves love. Character does. Kindness does. Courage does. And every day I remain silent, I realize those truths even more. Those words carried a calm strength that no one expected. It was as though an invisible burden had finally been lifted. The friend nodded slowly. Then don't let fear write the ending to a story that hope has already started. That sentence echoed long after the conversation ended. But something even more surprising happened next. As everyone prepared to leave, your soulmate reached into a pocket and quietly unfolded something they had been carrying all along. It wasn't valuable because of what it was made of. It was valuable because of what it represented. The friend looked at it, then back at your soulmate with complete surprise. What made you keep this for so long? The answer that followed would reveal a hidden chapter of this story, one that connects directly to you in a way no one could have imagined. And that unexpected revelation begins in the next part. Hold on. Because the object resting in your soulmate's hand was far more meaningful than anyone in that room expected. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't rare. To an outsider, it may have looked completely ordinary. Yet the moment their friend saw it, their expression changed. "What is that?" they asked softly. Your soulmate smiled, a smile carrying both warmth and years of quiet reflection. "It's a reminder," they replied. The friend looked closer. A reminder of what? For a brief moment, no answer came. Your soulmate simply traced their fingers across the small keepsake, almost as though it held a memory too precious to explain quickly. Then they finally spoke. "Whenever I begin believing that time, age, or other people's opinions should decide my future, I look at this. It reminds me that the most important connections are never built on numbers. They're built on understanding." The room fell silent once again. Not because anyone disagreed, but because every person present realized those words carried a truth they had forgotten. How many beautiful possibilities have been delayed simply because someone feared what others might think? Stay with this thought. Sometimes the biggest obstacle is never the distance between two people. It's the story they keep repeating inside their own minds. The friend folded their arms and asked one final question that no one else had dared to ask. "So what changed last night?" Your soulmate looked up without hesitation. "I realized something." Another quiet pause. "I've spent too much time worrying about whether they'll question their own worth because of their age. But what if they're waiting for someone to remind them that their value has never depended on a number?" Those words seemed to unlock something invisible. The atmosphere no longer felt uncertain. It felt clear. Almost as if a new direction had quietly appeared where there had only been questions before. Imagine discovering that the answer you've searched for wasn't hidden somewhere in the future. It was hidden inside one decision you hadn't yet made. Your soulmate's friend nodded slowly. "Then maybe your next step isn't waiting anymore." A gentle breeze drifted through the open window. It was an ordinary moment. Yet somehow it felt like the beginning of an entirely different chapter. Your soulmate stood, slipped the keepsake safely back into their pocket, and said something that nobody in the room has forgotten since. When the right connection enters your life, it doesn't ask whether you've lived more birthdays. It asks whether you've become someone who knows how to care, listen, grow, and stay true to your heart. Those words stayed with everyone. Because they carried no pressure. Only peace. If you're still listening, perhaps there's a reason this message found you today. Every journey unfolds at its own pace, and every meaningful connection has its own timing. Sometimes the greatest transformation begins with a single shift in perspective. Then, just as everyone thought the conversation had finally reached its conclusion, a phone resting quietly on the table lit up. No one had touched it. A new message appeared on the screen. Your soulmate glanced at it, and for the first time that entire night, a genuine smile appeared, calm, hopeful, and unmistakably different from the tears that had come before. The friend noticed immediately. What happened? They asked. Your soulmate looked at the message one more time before quietly answering. I think this is the sign I've been waiting for. No one in the room knew exactly what the message contained. But everyone could see one thing clearly. The fear that had filled the room earlier was gone. In its place was quiet confidence. And what that unexpected message revealed would completely reshape everything your soulmate planned to do next. Before you decide this story has reached its destination, wait for one more moment. Because the message that appeared on the screen did not contain dramatic words. It didn't announce a miracle. It didn't reveal a grand secret. Yet somehow, it carried exactly what your soulmate needed to see. Their friend watched carefully. So, are you going to tell me what it says? Your soulmate looked down at the glowing screen, smiled quietly, and answered. Not yet. The friend laughed softly. You've been emotional all night, and now you're smiling. Something changed. Your soulmate nodded. It reminded me that life has a strange way of placing hope in front of us just when we're ready to stop looking for it. Those words settled into the room like the first light of sunrise. Sometimes, the greatest turning points don't arrive with noise. They arrive with clarity. Stay a little longer. Because the next realization may be the one you've been waiting for. Your soulmate slipped the phone back into their pocket and took a slow breath. I've been asking the wrong question. The friend looked puzzled. What do you mean? I kept asking whether age would matter. But I should have been asking whether kindness, trust, and honesty matter more. The answer came almost instantly. They always do. For a few quiet seconds, neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to prove. Only something new to understand. Imagine carrying a fear for months. Only to discover it loses its power the moment you stop feeding it. That was exactly what happened. The friend gently placed a hand on your soulmate's shoulder. If someone sees your heart the way you see theirs, then don't let imagined barriers become real ones. Those words became the final piece of the puzzle. Your soulmate looked toward the horizon with renewed confidence. I don't want my future to be written by assumptions anymore. Instead, I want it to be written by honesty. At that moment, it felt as though an invisible weight had disappeared. The tears from earlier in the night had transformed into something entirely different. Quiet certainty. Not certainty about what tomorrow would bring, but certainty about the kind of person they wanted to be. If this story has spoken to you in some way, feel free to leave a comment sharing the lesson that stayed with you the most. And if these narrations inspire reflection, subscribing is simply a way to continue exploring these journeys together. Just as everyone prepared to leave, the friend turned back one last time. "There is one thing I still don't understand." "What is it?" your soulmate asked. The friend smiled. "Out of everyone you could have imagined a future with, why them?" Your soulmate didn't need time to think. "They remind me that life isn't about finding someone who fits every expectation. It's about finding someone who makes you become your best self." The friend stood there in silence. Because some answers cannot be improved. They can only be felt. As the door slowly closed behind them, your soulmate remained alone for a few peaceful moments. They looked at the sky and whispered something so softly that almost no one could have heard it. "I hope our paths meet at exactly the right time." Then they smiled again. Not because every question had been answered, but because they no longer feared the unknown. And while they walked into a brand new morning with hope in their heart, someone else, in a completely different place, was about to uncover a truth connected to this story, a truth that neither of them could have predicted, yet one that would bring two separate journeys closer than ever before. A new chapter was already beginning, even though neither of them realized it yet. Somewhere else, far from that quiet conversation, another unexpected moment was unfolding. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of moment people often overlook, until they realize later that it changed everything. Your soulmate woke the next morning with an unusual sense of peace. For the first time in a long while, they weren't replaying old fears. They weren't asking whether the difference in age would become a wall between two futures. Instead, a different question filled their thoughts. What if I've been underestimating the strength of this connection all along? That single thought stayed with them throughout the day. Sometimes, transformation doesn't happen because life suddenly changes. Sometimes it happens because one belief quietly disappears. Think about that. How many opportunities have been waiting on the other side of one new perspective? As the hours passed, your soulmate found themselves smiling at the smallest things. Their closest friend noticed immediately. "You seem lighter today." "I am." "What changed overnight?" Your soulmate looked toward the horizon before answering. "I finally stopped imagining every possible obstacle, and started imagining every possible opportunity." The friend smiled knowingly. "That's the version of you I've been hoping to see." There was no longer any sadness in their voice. Only calm confidence. But then, something completely unexpected happened. While sorting through old belongings, your soulmate discovered something they hadn't seen in years. It wasn't hidden on purpose. It had simply been forgotten until the perfect moment arrived. A handwritten note. Folded carefully. Time had faded the edges, but the words were still clear. Across the top was a simple sentence. "Never let fear decide what your heart already understands." Your soulmate stared at those words for several quiet moments. Almost as if life itself had repeated yesterday's lesson in a completely different form. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps certain reminders arrive exactly when we're finally ready to receive them. Stay with this story. Because every piece is connecting. Holding that note, your soulmate whispered. I've been searching for certainty, when all I really needed was courage. That realization changed everything. No longer did they see age as something to analyze. They saw character, compassion, patience. The quiet strength that cannot be measured by years. Their friend looked at the note and smiled. So, what happens now? Your soulmate answered without hesitation. I stop waiting for the perfect moment. I become the right person for the moment that arrives. Those words carried a quiet power. Not rushed. Not forced. Simply true. If you've stayed with this journey until now, perhaps you've noticed something important. Every chapter has pointed toward the same idea: the deepest connections are not built by perfect timing, they are strengthened by honesty, understanding, and the courage to move forward with an open heart. As evening approached, your soulmate looked toward the setting sun and felt something they hadn't experienced in a very long time. Not certainty about the future, but peace with the present. And strangely enough, at that exact moment, somewhere beyond their awareness, another conversation about you was just beginning. A conversation that would reveal a surprising truth no one had expected. And the words spoken there would become the final